This is the Unstoppable Podcast, where we are dedicated to bringing you comprehensive insight into the ways and purposes of God. We hope this podcast will encourage, equip, and empower you with meaningful insight from the Word of God to receive His promises and live a life without limits. As you realize your potential, you will join a dynamic group of passionate people who are actively bringing the unstoppable power of heaven into the darkest places on earth. Here is your host, Justin Self.
Hello, this is Justin Self, and I wanted to say Happy New Year. This is the first podcast of 2023, and we are well into our third season. Wow, I am blown away that this is the third season of this podcast, and I think it's awesome. I'm enjoying it. I know Eric, our producer, is enjoying it, and I've been hearing lots of good things, and the numbers are going up. It's awesome. So it's pretty cool. So thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. I love it. And I'm blown away by the fact that this is actually reaching out and touching people. I just want to say really quickly before we go into this episode today that this really was a dream on my heart that I believe God spoke to me about doing a podcast. And so it's really cool to see how things, come together and how the right people come together. And, again, today you're going to see an awesome guest, and it's cool to see people wanting to be on the podcast, and this type of thing. And I love connecting with people. And I found out something, fairly recently about myself that not only do I love connecting with people personally, but what I really, really like is connecting other people together, right? Like maybe there's somebody over here and there's somebody over there, and they never really would have probably ever crossed paths, but I can have a part to play in their story where they actually do cross paths. It's like, oh, I'll introduce you to the so-and-so, and it sounds like this person can really meet your need or whatever. And I just found out I love that about life. And I feel like that's a big part of this podcast. And so today, we're going to deviate a little bit from, the normal stuff, and I'm going to go into an interview, more of a conversation really, with Bobby deLancellotti. He is an awesome, awesome guy, all around awesome guy. He was a pastor for 34 years. Him and his wife, Denise, co-founded this wonderful, it's awesome, this coalition. It's this nonprofit organization here in the Central Coast of California. It's called Estero Bay Kindness Coalition. You're going to hear us talk about it on the podcast today. And I love Bobby's heart. And one of the reasons why I wanted him on the podcast is because I see a lot of myself in him and his passion to just go for it. And, there's not everybody's like us, but I feel like I'm that way as well. Like he is, where it's like, I don't want to just sit around and let the grass grow under my feet. I don't want to watch the paint dry. Like if I see a need or if I see something that lines up with my passion and my vision and like basically, in a nutshell, if I can do something about a problem, if I see something happening and I want to do something about it, and I think I can at least make a dent in it, or, hey, no one else is doing this, why don't we just do something about it? I love that. And that's how Bobby is. And you're going to hear him from his heart today on the podcast about this. And I'm totally the same way. I really want to continue to encourage you to partner with us because we're seeing some really cool things. I want to make it easier for folks to be able to give, to partner, and also to see kind of what we're doing with the money. It's not just podcast equipment. I really want to show you some pictures and videos of stuff that we're doing in Kenya. It's so rad. I sound like a surfer because here I am on the Central Coast of California. I've changed. I am a surfer now too. But seriously, it's so awesome what we're doing. And not that we're so cool. Okay. I don't want to try to make myself sound awesome or something. That's not the point. The point is that I'm connected to some really, really cool people. And seriously, just a little bit of money goes so far in this particular region in Kenya that we're serving people. It's the coolest thing to me in the whole world to see a need, be living in just such opulent abundance that we do here. Most of us in America, most of us listening to this podcast truly are living in tremendous abundance. And I love it. I just love being able to help people and encourage and build people. And that's something that we're able to do through our partners in Kenya. So again, that's a big part of this, hey, donate to us kind of thing, give money to us. And so I'm aware of that. Not everybody knows that. So just so you know, that's coming. We're going to have something about that on the website. Another thing too, if you are in the Central Coast area, I encourage you to check out, for the next 2 months, check out Sunroom Coffee. They are located in Atascadero. and they're over there at ABC Church, or you can just look them up, Sunroom Coffee. And my good friends Annie and Josh McEwen are the managers there, and they have a heart for missions. And so 20% of their profits at the coffee shop goes directly to missions work. They have so graciously agreed to let me host a little booth there where I'm selling sandals, not a booth. It's a little marketplace, I guess. And so if you go there and you see a bunch of sandals, those are sandals that we brought in from Kenya, from Watamu, Kenya, which is the region that we're working in. And I know the owner personally of the sandal shop. I've purchased sandals for my wife there, and I was there and I was like, man, this is awesome. I can get these at a pretty low cost. I can ship them over to the US for a pretty decent deal. I bet I could make a profit on these things. And not me personally, but this could be an opportunity to raise funds for the local churches and the local nonprofits over there when they're struggling financially and their economy is in crisis. It's not that bad to ship it over here to the US and make a profit, and I could send the money back directly to them. And so that's something that I've been kind of starting into, and it's been successful so far. So for the next 2 months, Sunroom Coffee is hosting a little table where our sandals are going to be there. It's called Sandals with a Story. So you can check it out. I have a little poster board. You can see the whole story there of where the money goes and how it gets invested into the community in Kenya, who handles the money and all that stuff. But I guarantee you it's awesome. We're able to buy Bibles for pastors who have no Bibles. I mean, honestly, people will travel for miles and miles barefoot. I'm not making this up, to get a Bible because they have a church out in the middle of the bush country and they don't have a Bible. It's crazy stories like that. And not only that, but recently we were able to feed over 100 families. Each family has between 4 and 6 people in it. We're able to feed these folks. And I mean, they are going through some tremendous difficulty right now. So I don't want to go too long before the podcast. I wanted to share with you my heart. I wanted to share you what 2023 is kind of going to be about. It's really going to be, I'm going to be pushing for missions and giving and stuff like that. So just so you know, it's coming. You know me, right? If you listen long enough, you know I'm passionate about missions. I'm passionate about reaching out and helping people when we have an opportunity to, which the opportunities are all around us. It doesn't have to just be overseas. And again, today on the podcast, you're going to hear from Bobby, who is doing this stuff right here in the Central Coast of California. And so I really encourage you to buckle in and listen to Bobby and listen to our conversation and just be inspired, be encouraged. What can you do in your sphere right now just to love people? Again, I'm talking about Africa and I'm talking about sandals and all this stuff. And that's something I'm doing and I can do, but you don't have to do that. It doesn't necessarily have to look like that for you. Are you smiling at your coworkers? Are you being a good friend? Are you working hard for your boss? Stuff like that where you can just show simple kindness and love every single day. All right, so that's a great intro for today's podcast. I really hope you enjoy it. And here we are going to begin talking to Bobby deLancellotti of Estero Bay Kindness Coalition. Here we go.
Thanks, Justin. Great to be here. Love your heart, man. And my dad is Caesar Augustus deLancellotti. So yeah, it's definitely an Italian name.
Really?
He was born and raised in Italy, came through Ellis Island. When he was 14, lied about his age, joined the Navy at 16, fought in World War II, the whole 9 yards.
Oh my goodness.
And so yeah.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Caesar, yeah, that's my dad, Big C's. And my mom was Irish immigrant.
Okay.
So we're first generation on both sides. My mom had 6 kids. 3 of them are really dark-skinned and hairy. You have to shave 3 times a day. One of them is my sister.
Oh, no.
And then the other 3 have really fair skin like me and my mom. So, yeah, that's the deLancellotti background. Just to give you a little background on my name.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. So Bobby with his wife, Denise, are the founders of Estero Bay Kindness Coalition. And I'd love to hear some more about this, but from what I understand, it's a local nonprofit. It only got started just a few years ago, am I right?
April of 2023, it'll be 5 years. So yeah, about 4 3/4, yeah.
And it grew, I mean, it looks like exponentially from just, you reached out to the principal at Del Mar Elementary School. He said, hey, how can we help some needy families or some kids? What's going on? We want to help. And he gave you, what was it, 9 kids or?
Yeah, we took 10 families the first year. This was 2017 around Christmas. And so what we're still doing every year is called Adopt a Family. And what we do is we adopt families and we work through the school administrators, and they give us names of under-resourced families that we get to help. And so we started with 10 families that year. We get them 2 gifts each, a fun gift and a practical gift, and then a $100 gift certificate from either Spencer's or back then it was a Cookie Crock was still here or whatever. Okay. And so, or a grocery outlet, each year that's grown. And this year we did 49 families for Adopt a Family over Christmas at 3 different schools. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and you have more than that going on too, right?
Absolutely.
That's how it started.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us just a little bit about I mean, there's such a, to me, there's a big umbrella. It looks pretty large, but even just hearing you talk about how it was only a couple, less than a decade old, I think it's amazing that it grew so fast. There's obviously a need for it. So can you give me just a quick overview? Give our listeners a quick overview? And
Yeah, I mean, timing is everything, right? I mean, you look back and see, I mean, of course, God's story is so interwoven in everything that we've done because of, my background as a pastor for 34 years. I was one of those guys that was really stupid that opted out of Social Security and, lied and took a vow of poverty, but once you're out of the system, it's very difficult to get back. We never did. And so I don't have any retirement. And because the Vineyard, I was a Vineyard pastor. And if some of your listeners might not be familiar, but the Vineyard Christian Fellowship. It was kind of a younger movement. And so they still don't have things set up for pastors and things like that, like a normal, quote unquote, denomination would. So each church is kind of on its own. So we never really had any money set aside. And so, so I did that for 34 years. And I worked for LifeWater International for 3 years.
yeah.
I was what was called a church representative or church advocate. And I would go and speak at churches, groups up and down the West Coast, speaking on behalf of the rural poor and the poorest of the poor. And I loved doing that, taking teams to Africa and Southeast Asia, which I loved. But then I had my second back surgery and I just couldn't get on another airplane anymore. So I couldn't do it. So I kind of so I found myself in a very humbling place of, not having any resources, not knowing what to do. And so a friend of mine who used to be a Vineyard pastor opened a bar in San Luis Obispo called the Broad Street Pub.
Okay.
And 2 ex-pastors. And so they say, hey, you can come pour beers for us if you want to. And so I did that for about 6 months. And I also drove Uber for 6 months. And that was a very humbling time. It was a time where, my ego, my false self, my own pride, the reality is you have to grow up before you grow old. Just because you're older doesn't mean you're mature. But we're always in this process. No one's arrived, right, Justin?
Yeah, totally.
So, I remember one night at the bar, I was cleaning up and it was locked and I was washing dishes of some tacos or something that I had cooked. And I actually looked at myself. I said, what in the hell am I doing with my life? And I was so angry. I was so down on myself, like I'm a failure, blah, 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 blah. Out of that brokenness, and then I found that voice of God. I know you have a book talking about face-to-face, about hearing the voice of God. But, I hear that loving voice of the Father I've heard so many times before say, Bobby, I love you, but you're so full of yourself in so many ways. But, I'm your papa. I love you. And remember what I've always told you, my life versus kind of is, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. And so that's always been the foundation thing for me. When I'm going through struggles, I always try to remember that. And so that was probably my lowest point. And that kind of led up to the whole thing over the holidays. We were getting ready and we were going to a little small faith community here in North Morro Bay called Coastlands Vineyard. And so I approached a principal at Del Mar Elementary School. Her name is Janet Gould, a wonderful lady, and just told her about Adopt a Family, something we used to do at our church in Cambria. And so we ended up of Christmas 2017, we adopted 10 families, which was beautiful. And then after the first year, we got this beautiful letter from Janet saying, thanking us for how blessed the families were, how impacted they were. And then what really got me on this journey was there's just a PS she put in her note. She said, PS, by the way, did you know that 64% of our students are at the poverty line or below?
Wow.
And not only blew my mind, but that broke my heart.
Yeah.
And so I thought, let's do something about that, And so I had a good friend named Jack Little, who was a mentor who actually planted the San Luis Vineyard back in the 70s, kind of a prolific church planter guy. He had done something called Got Your Back, which is a backpack program he started in San Diego, which was kids that are on the free or reduced lunch, which is a poverty line. Those kids would get a backpack over the weekend. And in that backpack was enough food for 2 breakfasts, 2 lunches, 2 dinners, healthy snack, fruit, milk, and juice. So we thought, let's give it. Let's just give it a try. So I approached Janet. So in April of 2018, we started with 10 students in the backpack program. And by the end of the year, we're up to about 40 students. Then Janet asked me if I would do summer school because the schools here combined together. So Monarch Grove Elementary, Baywood Elementary, and Del Mar do it together as a summer school. And so what we ended up doing that summer of 2018 is we did the backpack program for the kids over the summer. And then the next year we ended up doing it for Baywood, for Monarch Grove, and then also for Cayucas Elementary and Cambria Elementary. And then a few months after that, we adopted the middle schools, Los Osos Middle School and Cambria Middle School, as well as a Montessori school. And so we went from about 10 students in about a year to about 230 students.
Wow.
And 4 different food pantries and about 40 to 50 volunteers. During that time, I just thought, well, I started planning with my friend Bill, who's my life coach. He's kind of pulled this vision out of my heart of something I've always wanted to do, which is to bring people together. I really see the gospel as something that doesn't alienate, but something that draws people together. And so I wanted to do something that was not a Christian organization, but that was a coalition or as a gathering of people. And Bill used the term, how about coalition, which I really loved. I love the term kindness.
Yeah.
And so he kind of pulled this vision out of my heart of that. And we came up after 3 or 4 sessions with this mission statement of the reason that we exist. We want to partner together with the nonprofit world, for-profit world, schools and churches to work together for the greater good of those living on the margins in the greater Estero Bay area.
Yep.
And so just to demonstrate kindness, period. No questions asked, to love without an agenda, to offer people hope and know that somebody cares about them and loves them, and no questions asked.
Love that.
And so that's how we started. So that evolved over time. You know, we like I said, we were up to 220, 230 students, 4 different food pantries, tons of volunteers, and then the pandemic hit, right? But the good part about that was that, if there's a good part, is that I already been talking to Janet, the principal, because they had mentioned that, hey, there's a good chance they're going to be shutting down the schools. And I thought, well, how can we go from plan A to plan B and still help these families? And so when schools were canceled, one of the things that San Luis Food Bank did, which was really good, is they did a free food drop-off. You can get a box of food at Los Osos Middle School or at Del Mar Elementary. And so that helped a lot of families. There was no questions asked. But the reality was the most food insecure families, the most under-resourced families, they didn't have a car. They're working 2 jobs. They're single parents. They're home with kids with disability. They didn't have a vehicle, whatever. And so from the very beginning, we took the most vulnerable of that list, the back end of that list we took. So we got the names. We work primarily through the schools, which really makes our organization unique, because at each school, there's not only a school administrator who really cares about the families and loves them, but each school has a school advocate as well that's bilingual, that works with some of our bilingual families as well too. So we work hand in hand with those families. And we started something called Bags of Love, which is 2 full bags. We went from feeding kids on the weekend to feeding families during the week.
Wow.
And so we call that Bags of Love. And Bags of Love we had 2 full bags of groceries, protein-rich groceries, and a full bag of really healthy, good fruits and vegetables, produce. And we started with, I think it was 35 the first couple of months. It grew. And right now we're doing 164 families in both Los Osos, Baywood Park, Morro Bay, and Cayucas that get hand-delivered each and every week. The only week of the year we don't do it is 1 week over Christmas. That's how Bags of Love started. And then my sweet wife, she really has a heart for kids. She's always worked with kids. She loves kids. And she had a dream one night, and she remembered growing up how when her mom took her out and got her a new dress, how she felt so much dignity and value.
Wow.
So she started a clothing store, a free clothing store called Sunshine and Seed.
Okay, yeah.
To give people hope and dignity to kids. And so we have our own store now, and people can come shop for free, and where they get, every family that comes in, each child gets a free packet, a couple of packets of socks, a couple of packets of underwear, a free sweatshirt and pajamas, and then new and gently used dresses, shoes, clothes, jeans, jackets, whatever. And we've served right now about a little over 160 children in the last 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
And that continues to grow. And so that's our 3 basic programs we have. And then, so we have Bags of Love, we have Got Your Back, we have Sunshine and Seed, and then at Christmas, we do Adopt a Family as well. And I've got a lot of other things in my heart that I want to get going, but we've been running to keep up with the need. And, you know, it's kind of good news, bad news in some ways. I mean, it's horrible that so many people need help, but it's been advantageous in God's timing that we've been kind of Johnny on the spot. And the beautiful thing too, Justin, is that because I've lived in the area for a long time and I've pastored at 2 different churches in the county, I have a lot of relational, relational equity.
Sure.
And so I can tap in and leverage that. I have a lot of people that know me and love me, and that I love them and I know them. And so we've got some incredible partners. So in my partnership with the coalition, we've got about 37 for-profits that partner with us actively. We've got about 32 nonprofits that we partner with. We've got eight schools, and we have 12 churches that we have direct partnerships with. And so I see, I like to say, man, it's so much easier to build walls than it is to build bridges, right? And I'm into building bridges, not walls.
That's good.
And so, I don't know if you wear this. I'll give you a little, you're kind of a scholar guy. But even the word priest, right, in Latin means pontifex, and that's what that literally means is a bridge builder.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and
That's
so
cool.
the Pope, they call him Pontifex Maximus, the bridge builder,
Yeah.
So we're all we're all
Cool.
priests in the
That's
New Testament. We know that. So all of us are called to build a bridge.
That's good.
And when you build a bridge, sometimes, people will walk on you from both sides and be misunderstood. But I feel like I'm called to build a bridge. I have a real heart for people, to love people. One of my favorite terminology for evangelism is loving people until they ask why. And
good.
so
That's good.
because I've been through the whole gamut, everything from the Jesus People movement and, all the way through what is Toronto Renewal, whatever. I've seen it all, but I found that people have to know that you care, and know that you love them and that you value them as a human being.
Yeah.
And so today it's so important, I think, that we're able to express our faith in a way that's genuine, that's real. Brene Brown's got a great quote. She said, love is beautiful when it's practiced, but love is beautiful when it's professed, but it's only meaningful when it's practiced. I just love that, and so, we're really good at saying, hey, man, love one another, but man, love is a verb. It's not a noun, right?
That's it. That's good.
So you got to put it into action. There's no way. Love always, moves, and love is never neutral. Love never stands on the sidelines, Love always gets involved. It gets us uniform dirty, and so, we're trying to love our people and love our community and let them know they're valued, that they matter to God, they matter to us. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
Well, I'm just looking here at this list, and you're talking about being a bridge builder, and I see all the churches, I see the for-profits, I see the nonprofits, and the schools, and this is a pretty big list, like you're mentioning, and honestly, I can't imagine any other way for there to be a bridge between all of these different pieces. Like, this is amazing to me that you have. I just think it's cool, and so I think I'd like to ask you if you could comment on. You mentioned this to me earlier once, where some people might look at you as a former pastor and a spiritual leader, but here you are. You've made a definite decision to do a non-religious nonprofit,
right?
And again, I know it comes from this heart of this bridge building, but would you mind commenting on that? Because I know you're getting flack over it, or at least you have gotten some flack over it.
Yeah, we've had churches that say, well, I'm too liberal, or which is fine. Whatever. Those are the things I just know because, back in the day, I maybe would have gotten bummed, but I realized, we're all on a journey with Jesus. And I bless them on their journey. And I want to have the freedom to explore and grow in my journey as a follower of Jesus, because a lot of things have changed over the years for me. But the main of the plane never changes. Yeah. Love is the core and center of, I believe, of what we're called to both be and to do. Mm-hmm. And so one of the beautiful, what's the word I want to use? One of the beautiful side effects or bonuses of the coalition is that, yes, we've served a lot of people and we've fed a lot of people and we've given a lot of people hope. But on the flip side of that coin, Justin, what's been so beautiful is that I've got people learning to love each other and actually becoming really close friends that normally wouldn't even talk to each other.
You mean with like your volunteers?
Yes.
You mean? Yeah.
I've got people left, right, middle, in, out,
That's
whatever.
Awesome.
And so I just crack up when I see these people that normally would be like quote unquote enemies or like giving each other negative crap, on Facebook or something, or on Instagram or something, and learning how to celebrate their birthdays now and listen and learning to listen.
Man, that's awesome.
And having dialogue.
Cool.
And trusting them.
Yeah.
And that's really some of the healthy work of just kind of breaking down those walls, right? I don't know, it was Keith Green or somebody years ago. Maybe I just made it up. I don't know. But I think he had this song about being a see-through servant. And that's always really stood out to me as I want people to see through me and see Christ in me. Yeah. And see that they're valued, that they're loved, that they're accepted, that they're forgiven. And I want them to see it in me, or I feel like I don't really have the right to dialogue with them on deeper issues.
Yeah.
So if we're not, in other words, if we're not living it,
Yeah.
it gets pretty weak to try to you can have a proclamation of something, but there's people have really good orthodoxy, but our orthopraxy sucks sometimes.
That's
right?
good.
And so we want to be people.
That's good. People
of the King, and that means that doesn't mean we're all perfect or happy together, but I'm giving you grace to be on your journey. As a young man, I love where you're coming from, and I've been on a journey, and I'm still growing and learning every day. And I'll tell you, I have 4 kids that are millennials who grew up in the church. Probably have taught me more than just about anybody. And they're very honest and they're very good. They call me out on my stuff. My kids do sometimes. I love that. Because we have this vibrant relationship where they see the grace of God in me, and I give them the space to experience God in their way.
Cool.
That's been a beautiful thing because now I can see with different eyes.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, our worldview are like these glasses, right? We have a lens that we see the world through. And if we have a dogmatic, doctrinal lens that's judgmental, and we see a retributive God, a God of, I see him a whole different, through a different lens I've been seeing now. That might not be your lens, but God bless you, but it's my lens now because God has given me this lens to see in a broader perspective. So I'm trying to walk out with integrity what God's deposited in my heart. And really, it's a life, and I've had to learn a life of, and this is going to sound so full of myself. I just realized, God, I'm so pompous, but what an ass. But I feel like I have to live out my own journey, and it's a life of trust. And of course, it's always a life of trust, whether you've got money coming in or you don't. Faith isn't a certainty to me. Faith is more, especially in the New Testament, it's all about trust, and so it's a life of trust, and so. And I'm learning, and this is going to sound so elementary, but it's so true that God is good, God can be trusted, and God is actively involved in my life.
Come on.
I mean, that's one of my like mantras every day. And I have to talk about a confession. I'm realizing that, and I have to have that so centered in my mind because that gets so challenged.
It does.
It gets so confronted head on. When I see tragedy or I see pain or I see us struggling and not getting enough money for the coalition or I see people not getting along, whatever it may be. But that's my center, that's my core, is that, God, you are who you said you are, that you're good, that you're trustworthy, and you're for us. We're in this river swimming together, and I'm in this journey becoming more like you. And one day I'm going to see you and I'm going to be fully like you. But the reality is we're all these incomplete, we're all, Jackson Browne has a great song. I just love it. He goes, we're just all dreamers. I'm dreaming about every man. And I have this dream. I just want to see people love each other and love God and love their families. And I wish that we as a church would be marked by love more than anything else. That's my heart's cry, not our doctrine, not our buildings, not our light shows, but by our love.
Absolutely.
That's not putting anybody down. But I've just been around the block a little bit. I've seen some things. 69 years old. I was a pastor for 34 years.
Bobby, have you mentioned the light shows and all that. I know that was kind of an analogy, but was there a moment in your life that you were kind of in that world? And then did you have like a snap out of it moment, or was that even a reality to you?
Good question. I think one of the really good things I love about the Vineyard, my early upbringing in the Vineyard, is that, well, first of all, they wouldn't even let me in the Vineyard now, which is good. They've got requirements and education. I was just a hippie living on a ranch, growing pot, up in Cambria. I had a pretty radical conversion experience. I went back to the health food store where I used to hang out, called the Honeysuckle in Cambria. I said, hey, man, I think I just had this encounter with God. And they went, well, hey, far out, what happened, And so I told them, and I think for a long time I made people mad, sad, or glad, because I just kind of had this radical, but I've always been this simple. I went to college, I played football in college, I just didn't go to class. So I never graduated, So, and I don't have a lot of biblical background, but there's my friend Jack Little, who was a pastor in San Luis, took me under his wing, kind of mentored him. He laid hands on me and said, man, God's on you for Cambria, go for it. And I did. And for some reason, God has blessed that I don't even remember why I was telling you that, but that was probably a good story anyway.
Yeah, that's cool. No, that's awesome.
That's what happens when you get older, man. You lose track.
No, I mean, okay, so the reason I ask about did you have an aha moment kind of from the church world production?
That's what you're talking about.
Well, we need to be, maybe this is what church should look like, loving people. I don't know. I mean, so for me, I've been walking in the Lord I'm not trying to hijack this, but I was born and raised in a Christian home.
Right.
Again, I have nothing bad to say. I had an amazing upbringing, loving family, amazing Church of the Nazarene. Oh man, they loved God and they loved the Word and they taught me the Word. And it was awesome. But really, it was my choice to kind of walk away and not make anything more of it. And I had also a very radical encounter with the Lord. And I believe I was already saved, but nobody would have ever known. There was no outward manifestation. There was no love. There was no kindness. I didn't even have any type of relationship with God, honestly, except for being saved. Had my radical encounter with the Lord. And then I think for me, it was actually kind of an awesome, really beneficial thing that I know not everyone gets. I immediately plugged into a church that was extremely missional. And so for me, my experience was not like so many others where I know some people, they get used to this culture of church just being this huge production. And I hate to use the word consumerism, but to a degree, I think some people do show up and they have this big, beautiful light show.
It's huge. No, it's relevant. Yeah.
And these are the body of Christ. And so I love them and I care deeply for them, but I can kind of see that, And so for me, I was in a missional church. So for me, I cut my teeth in the ways of the Lord with a missional heart, because this church was just so after going after people. But I know that's not everyone's experience.
Yeah, I could say that one of the core values I loved about my Vineyard background is that they always taught us that any decision you make as a leader has to be based on not a trend, but on your values. And so undermining what you do are your core values. And so I had 5 or 6 really core values. And so as I went through, and then that's what we're known for in Cambria is, reaching out to community, loving families. We came up, actually a man named Steve Sjogren had a great term called servant evangelism, where we would do acts of kindness, free car washes, teams would go around and clean bathrooms in restaurants, yard cleanups, you name, free Coke giveaways. We did it all, and so and our mantra back then is we just want to show God's love in a practical way, which was really, which was good. And, but we think we always had that little kind of a thing in the back of our mind, and he has, that you can kind of slip him your, presentation, whatever it may be like that. So, but
kind of have the gospel in your back sleeve, ready to kind of pull this thing out.
But I think we've always been, my heart, my core has always been missional. When I don't know if you realize this or not, but this is not to sound like, please, it's not boasting, but when I left Cambria after almost 11 years and I went on staff at Anaheim, that was like the mothership,
Yeah.
And it was a large church. So I went from a little church of 200 people, a church of like 3,000-4,000 people. And I was one of the assistant senior pastors, and I was in charge of outreach and evangelism and integrating people into the church and things like that. And that was a huge move for our family and stuff. So I've always that's always been my heart to be an outward focused church, to be a church that really cared about the poor, that cared about families, that cared about kids, all those kind of things like that. So I think those are core values that kind of stuck with me. And yes, some churches I was like, for instance, at Anaheim, I came right, you might be familiar with this term or not, I'm not sure, but I came right on it had kind of peaked, but was just starting to wane a bit, was the Toronto renewal, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and that was right in the middle of all that, trying to do evangelism. And then, just different kind of phases of things that you go through over the years, So that was the second church. And then we took a little church called the Whittier La Habra Vineyard that I was a senior pastor for 3 years. And that church had been a church of about 1,000 people. And that it was, but it got down to a primary group, about 300 people the last 10 years. And why God had me take that, I'm not sure. I still don't know. But I promptly went in there and I grew the church from 300 to about 75 in about 2 months. Because I went in and pulled a Band-Aid off of stuff that I couldn't ever bring anybody to here. And people thought I was a heretic and da-da-da. But, what happened out of that, and out of that pain of people leaving and not leaving nice, but out of that challenging people and out of that pain, the church grew to way over that. And it was all young families and stuff from our neighborhood and things like this. It was a totally different thing. So there's a price when you pay that,
Yeah.
And then I came back and we were on staff at the San Luis Vineyards called Mountain Brook. And I would say I was the outreach guy for Mountain Brook and kind of associate senior pastor there. And we really focused on being outwardly focused, and we really had a great reputation in the community. But again, it was a little bit too, I'll just use the term, it was just a little too the light show kind of a thing. It was just too much emphasis on the building, not enough on the poor or outreach or giving. And so that was one of the values. And I felt like this was not who I am.
Yeah.
And so after almost 9 years, that's why I went to work for LifeWater.
Mm-hmm.
I was just a value thing. I felt like for me personally, I couldn't continue to do that.
Yeah.
And so, so to go and then work for the poorest of the poor, doing that in Africa, that was amazing. So it's been a journey for me all the way through, these years and years and years of doing what I've been doing. But we've always kept at the core, is love, giving, being sacrificial, being otherly. That's a term I love.
Otherly?
Yes, otherly.
Okay.
So always caring about others. It's like, cool. I really think it's important that we learn what it means to love our neighbor as ourselves. What does that look like? Yeah. Whatever our neighbor is, whoever our neighbor is, whatever gender or whatever affiliation they are, we love them unconditionally. We love them the way that Jesus loves them. So that's kind of my story. And so, but again, all the way through that, I have seen things, and because we are value-based people, there are things that I've had to make my mind say, this is who I am and this is who I'm not. Yeah. So I feel like that's why you're right. There has been different flavors, if you will, so to speak. But at the core of it is always missional, outward focus, whatever the current word is for it right now. But it's what it boils down to, Justin, is just being like Jesus, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that's the goal, right? Is our goal. Paul said it so well, right? He said, be imitators of God as much loved children, and what? And live a life of love. How? Even as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us. So, hey, man, the word imitate means to mimic. Yep. So we're to be like Jesus. Yep. And I'm not ashamed to say I'm not where I was, but I'm not where I used to be either. Yep. But I'm on this journey, and I realize I'm 69 years old. I'm going to be on this journey till the day I go home. And so, but it's worth my life. It's worth giving everything I have for. Yeah. When I met Jesus, my life was turned upside down. And so I know he's real. But I think what I found is that he's so much real than I ever thought, so much more loving, so much more kind. And seeing things for more of a Trinitarian, kind of a robust Trinitarian theology, and realizing that the very nature of God be this self-emptying, self-giving, co-suffering love, this beautiful sense, this is who God is. Yep. And it just so breaks your heart, and in such a good way. And how could you not live that out and give that to someone else? We would be, of all people, what's the word? I don't know, two-faced or something if we didn't. Yeah. We've been given such grace. Yeah. And I think and here's just one of my little points of contention, is that we focus so much on original sin, we've missed original grace. In Genesis 1, it says, it is good, it is good, it is good, it is good, it was very good. Yep. And so we realize each one of us are created in the very image and likeness of God. We're all are Mongo Dei. We all are image bearers, right? So we bear the image of God. Now we're being changed into his likeness. Yep. Whether you're the guy down the street or me or whatever, we're all growing in that. No one's arrived, right, but we're all image bearers, And so my way of seeing people like as in and out, good or bad, right or wrong, sinner, non-sinner, I'm seeing them as image bearers of God. Those that God went to the cross for, God that God loves and cares for and is passionate about. So I'm not seen as the other enemy. I'm seen as that my brother, my sister, my friend. Yep. How can I build a bridge that if you're far away that you can see? How can I lay my life down for the sake of others that others can see? Yeah. And so to me, it's a bigger than just kind of racking up numbers. Hey, right. I prayed for 5 people, but I've done all that. So I'm not knocking any of that. I've done everything. I'm laughing because
I know what you're. I've been there too.
And so it's like, I'm just seeing things in a little different perspective. Yeah.
Well, Jesus said the world may know, but what did he say? He said that the way that the world would know is that your love for one another. But then he also said something about
if you're a disciple. And what's a disciple?
A disciplined one or a follower of Jesus.
How many times did Jesus say in the New Testament to worship him?
He said to follow me.
How many times did he say to follow me?
A lot, yeah.
Okay, so even now, I know this is going to sound funky at times. I identify as a Christian, but some of the things because I have a hard time in some things of the church right now, I identify myself as a follower of Jesus. Yes, I'm part of the church, and I love the body of Christ, but I'm about following Jesus, and even over loyalty to a particular brand or denomination. Now, I love my brand. We all have faults, things like that, but yet we have to be called to be followers of Jesus, or else that's why there's 34,000 denominations right now or something bizarre.
Yeah, something.
Yeah. And so it's also good. What's really helped me, I know I'm rambling a bit, but reading a lot about the church mothers and church fathers and the early church and the Orthodox church, and realizing that even evangelical Christianity is not, it's very, very new. And it's very important to read history and look at some of our ancient traditions that we have in our orthodoxy. Again, orthodoxy is important, but orthopraxy is vital.
Yeah.
You can have wrong orthodoxy and have good orthopraxy. I think that's more in line with who God is, than having perfect orthopraxy and having nothing to show for it. I know I throw around big words like I know what I'm talking about. I really don't. But the reality is just we have to live it out, man.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Well, Jesus said that, remember he said to those on his right and on his left, he said, hey, I never knew you, to the guys on the left. He said, hey, and they're like, what are you talking about? He's like, I was sick and you didn't come and visit me. I was in prison, you didn't come and visit me. I was naked and you didn't clothe me. And so I think that goes back, and we actually talk about this on the podcast in other episodes, where in the likeness, and in the image of God, image bearers. And so we actually had a conversation a few episodes ago where we were discussing this very thing, looking at people through that lens. When I minister to somebody, as far as like when the word minister means serve, come underneath somebody, it's not that I'm slapping the gospel in their face and trying to get a point because I led someone to Christ, quote unquote. What it really is how do I come underneath that person, looking at them as, you know what, this person is, their life's in a mess, or they're an atheist, or whatever you want to say that is maybe offensive, or you look at them like a project, but that's not the case. They're they're in the image of God. They were made in His image. They have the same breath of life that I got. I'm not any better than them, but how can I come underneath them and serve them? And I think those questions, the right motivations, because what I'm hearing you talk about, Bobby, is a lot of the motivation behind what we do. Like orthopraxy, right? Somebody can do the right thing or make it look like the right thing, but is it coming from, what kind of motivation, what kind of heart is behind it? And I think a lot of it comes down to what you're just saying, is looking at them as the image of God. Wow, God made this person. He loves them. And then what can I do as a fellow image bearer to give love to this person and share that love?
Can I say one thing about motivation? I think that even on my best days, my motivation's mixed, because I'm still flawed, right? And so even when we do good or something happens, even on our best, I think if I was really honest, even on my best days, I would say there's still part of me in it. But that's okay. I mean, God shared, this is all part of the journey too, right? We're learning to recognize that shadow self, our false self, or old man, whatever you want to call it, and recognize and to kind of live into our true self of who we really are, who God created us both to be and to do. And even that word knowing, like Simon knew, that word know is gnosko in the Greek, and that intimates an intimate knowing. Yeah. And so God wants to know us. Yeah. Paul says, I want to know you and the power of your resurrection, the fellowship and your suffering, right? That word gnosko is like the same word too. It's that knowledge, that intimate knowledge. He longs to have friendship and relationship, and that's the beauty of that. So that's where I think that knowing comes from.
Well, before we started recording, I mentioned Song of Solomon a little bit, how I love the book and I'm reading it. Some of the things that you're talking about right now make me think of, when I read the Song of Songs, I used to think of it as just kind of this romantic love thing between a man and a woman, and I don't disagree that might be part of it, but I am personally convinced, as the more I read through it, that it does actually have an allegory between Jesus and the bride. And one thing that I've noticed recently about reading it is, even as the bride is, like you see this 4-stage progression of the bride getting closer to Jesus. And what I noticed recently was that even though she's rising up and she's getting closer to Jesus, she still has flaws and faults. And she still looks at herself and she's like she literally has graduated to the point where she is a queen. She's walking in authority. She now has the desires of His heart. She's now looking over like the vineyards and His world and His people, and she now has a heart for them. And she's not just all lovey-dovey, only Jesus, get my needs met. But she's actually graduated to this mature, walking in power woman. But then right in the middle of it, she's like starts talking about herself and realizing how many faults she has and how messed up she is. But then what does the Lord do? This is Song of Solomon chapter 6-8. The Lord speaks to her and is like, yet you're beautiful. Yet I love you. Yet your eyes are like dove eyes. And so here she is. she's got this weird thing going on where she's walking in authority, she's doing some cool stuff, but then she's aware of her own mess. But then, like you said earlier, what does it all come down to? The Father's heart. I love you. I see you beautiful. I see your eyes are beautiful, And I know for me, that's a major part of my life is that where no matter how awesome of a something that I do or whatever, it's very easy, and I want to be really careful not to get proud and not to go there.
Sure.
And I think for me, the thing that grounds me, no matter what successes or laurels that I have, it all comes down to my love relationship with the Father. And that's all I need. I don't need that other stuff. If I never saw another cool thing happen the rest of my life, I'd like to say that I'd be okay with it. And that's what I'm working on. But really, honestly, it's the love of the Father that gets me that gratification and satisfaction. So anyway.
It's beautiful. No, I mean, I love talking about this stuff because it's so healthy to verbalize things, because sometimes when you articulate something, you get it out in front of you. It helps you to see it clearer too. And then when you have somebody you can bounce things off of and have a perspective. So I'm grateful for the perspective. And because it's funny that the last couple of years, I mean, I think I'm used to being in the limelight a little bit or out in front, or so it's nice to be able to sit down and talk about some things. So anywho.
Yeah.
Thanks, Justin.
Absolutely. I've got maybe one more question here as we wrap up.
Sure.
What would you say to, one of our listeners or anybody who's listened to this far to the podcast? What would you say to them if they're the kind of person who wants to change their world? Maybe they're not the founder of a kindness coalition. Maybe they're just a regular person working a regular job. Maybe they don't feel like they're significant. But as you and I have talked about, everybody's made in the image of God. You can do things. You can love people. I guess, how do you put action to your beliefs? How do you become a follower of a Jesus, like what you're talking about?
I actually think this is really good. When I was very young, I had a kind of a life-changing moment when I was 17. A friend of mine who was quite a bit older, maybe 10 years older, was a friend of my sister's husband, took me to a movie when I was very vulnerable, and it was called Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. It was a story of St. Francis of Assisi by Franco Zeffirelli, who did Romeo and Juliet and a lot of different movies. Jesus of Nazareth, he did a bunch of really good movies. And that had a profound effect on my life. And I always thought about St. Francis. And I always have this kind of thinking of, this is what life is about. I've never really been one that runs after the money or whatever. I mean, I'm from five brothers and one sister, and they're all very successful and things like that. And I was like, oh, Bobby, he's always, whatever. And I love Mother Teresa. I've probably read all the books on Mother Teresa. I love all of the good things about. And Mother Teresa has the greatest thing. She says, there's a lot of people who want to do big things for God, but there's very few people who want to do small things for God. And she says, therefore, small things done with great love can change the world. Yeah. So I'm just doing the portion that God's put in my hand to do. And I've tried to be faithful over the years to steward that. I guess it's the best way of saying it, or put it into practice, plant that seed the best way I know how. And so we all start somewhere. So before you go and leave and sell and go to Kenya and volunteer with you or whatever, maybe try being nice to your neighbor. Maybe get to know their name. Maybe invite them over for coffee or something, or a glass of wine or whatever, Maybe volunteer at the local food bank, or, hey, volunteer with us.
Estero Bay Kindness Coalition, yeah.
Just kidding. .org. No,
I'm going to ask you for that in a minute. I'm not kidding.
No, that's cool. But really, seriously, just start. See, if everyone did something.
Yeah.
The news is such a drag, right? I mean, I can't watch the news anymore. But the reality is there's so much good news that we don't even see. Yeah. And I've met so many people who with hearts, and they feel, well, I'm not religious, and they'll say things like that. And I think to myself, oh my gosh, you're expressing the very heart of God in what you're doing. Yes. You're being Jesus to these people. And you don't even know it. And so it's beautiful. So I try to affirm those people, say, hey, what you're doing is beautiful. Yeah. Oh, just having those two neighbors over, that widow over there, that's the gospel. I mean, that's the meat. Yeah. You want to talk about the meat, man? Another great Wimberism, he always used to say, the meat's in the street, man. It's not in the, oh man, I got to get the meat, the word. No, he said, the meat's in the street. In other words, the meat's always in the doing.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm kind of biased in that direction, as you could tell. It's worked well for me and for my life. And I realize we all have different emphases, and we all have different callings and different things we're passionate about. But for me, I want to try to follow, and again, this is going to sound a bit presumptuous, but I really want to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. I want to be his hands and his feet the best I know how to be. So I can, and I know that if I can do that, if I can give someone a cup of cold water, if I can just love someone, if I can be kind to someone, you never know. I'll tell you one quick story. So a friend of ours, Camille Johnson, a gal who's on our board, she's 38, 39. She's a therapist in San Luis. And her parents were, her mom, we helped her as a single mom and helped their family. And they were a great family, they're amazing. And I went to her office opening in San Luis about a year ago, Denise and I did. And this kid walks in, he was probably in his 30s, and he had a Templeton, like Letterman's jacket on. And I used to coach football at Coast Union. I was one of the assistant coaches, And so that was our rival, was Templeton. And so I said, oh, you're a Templetonian, huh? And he goes, yeah, I grew up in Cambria, though. And he goes, are you Bobby deLancellotti? And I said, yeah. He goes, he got really teary-eyed. He says, my name is Carlos. I'll just not use his real name. It's not Carlos, but has a Latin heritage. And he said, my mom came from Mexico. We lived above Camosi's. You brought food to us you helped pay for my mom's rent. You took care of my family. And because of that, I was able to graduate from high school. I went to college. I have my teaching degree, and I'm coaching now at Templeton. And he was kind of tearing up. I started tearing up, as I realized I get to hear stories like that. See, that was just a seed, man.
Yeah.
That was just showing up, being present, being Jesus, and being love, right? Without an agenda, without a plan. Hey, this is what we're going to do. No, we're just going to love. Yeah. And would to God that we would be a people that would reflect the very image of God, and His image is love. Yeah. I just can't see God as any other. So I see a more inclusive God, a more Christ-like God. Yeah. I don't see a retributive God. I see a restorative God. That's the God that I believe. And if that's liberal, so be it. I'll take my chances, on the character and nature of God. And so, my life has changed. I have a son. I think I've told you my story about my son that about 12 years ago told me that he was gay. That took me on a whole nother journey that we can maybe talk about another time. That really sent me searching and seeing, okay, why am I excluding certain people and including other people? Yeah. How am I discriminating without even knowing it and having a personal bias that's been built in? Let's see what really the Bible says, what history is, what the church has always done. And so that has started, people call it deconstruction. And I think that can be a really healthy word because we're always deconstructing something. Mm-hmm. But I like to think of it more of, like what Father Richard Rohr says. He says order, which is you have like in Orthodoxy, disorder, and reorder, So my reorder, instead of getting stuck in disorder, and I have a lot of friends, ex-pastors or friends that are Christians, that are just cynical and bummed out with the church or this, and I just refuse to be a cynic. Yeah. I want something that's more a more beautiful God, a more Christ-like God, a more beautiful gospel, was what I'm looking at and looking for. Yeah. And so I want to live my life in a way that's positive, that's impactful. And I just want to be remembered when they do my funeral and say, hey, Bobby, he loved well.
That's it.
And if I can get that, bingo, man, it's a grand slam, right? And so that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking to hand off to my children, my grandchildren. When I struggle with not having any money and, sometimes I get down on I have a lot of that I grew up in the Catholic Church. I have a lot of Catholic guilt. I have a lot of wonderful things for the Catholic Church that I love, but a lot of shame and a lot of guilt I have to work through. And when I'm really struggling with not being a success or failure, one day God really spoke to me, speaking how God speaks in that gentle voice. And he said, Bobby, you're one of the richest men in the world. And I said, no, Papa, I'm not. He goes, you are. You know why? Your wife loves you, your children love you, and your grandchildren love you. You're rich. Don't ever forget that. And I'll never forget the Lord just speaking at me so clear. So anybody ask me, I'm wealthy. That's awesome. Don't have any in the bank, but it doesn't really matter, man. I'm a rich man. And I have to remind myself of that life is a gift and the giver is good.
That's it. Well, you really are rich, and I mean, just in the short amount of time that I've connected with you, I'm always the blessed one. I'm always the one that gets I feel like the wealth bleeds off because you're so positive, and it's not a fake positive. It's who you are, and it does come out of your being. And so
Thanks.
I'm honored, and I'm so thankful that you came on the podcast today. Can you tell us real quick, what if I want to encourage our listeners to check out the website and become a partner if you feel led to do it. If you love what they're doing, don't waste time. I mean, I like to tell people, you don't have to sit there and pray about something to make a move when it's the right thing to do. You don't have to sit there and say, oh, I'm going to pray about it, brother. No, if it's the right thing to do, if it strikes your heart, get on it and do it. Don't mess around. So
yeah, you can check out our website at Estero Bay Kindness Coalition.org. There's a contact page here if you want to volunteer. Also, if you want to donate, you can hit the donate button. It goes right to it. So Kindness Coalition, if you want to volunteer, if you want to donate, man, we have right now somewhere about 85 full-time volunteers. We're always looking for people because, of course, it's a volunteer army. So, people are always coming and going and are busy or life gets busy. But yeah, man, we've got a great crew of people. It's a very diverse crew of people, but you'll meet some very interesting people. I'll guarantee you that.
Yep.
Justin's helped. Last Tuesday, we didn't have one of our volunteers didn't show up, so I recruited Justin.
Yeah.
And he was so good about coming. And thanks for doing that,
Absolutely.
Justin. I love your heart, man.
yeah, no problem. You got me a chance to set up the podcast equipment twice. So
There we go.
Not a problem.
There we go.
Well, Bobby, thank you so much for being here. I'm so thankful. I'm so grateful that you took the time. It's an honor to be with you. I love your heart. I love what you're doing, your mission. And it's inspiring. I want to emulate that. And I want our listeners to emulate that. I want them to go out and love and do things and just to be empowered that they can love people where they're at right now. All right, Bobby, we love you. Thank you so much. And we're looking forward to talking to you again. All right, and that's all the time we have on today's episode. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope that was an encouragement to you. And we will see you on the next podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Unstoppable Podcast. For more resources, including previous episodes, blogs, and free downloadable content, visit us at unstoppableblog.net. You can also find us on Facebook at Unstoppable Blog. We hope this podcast has encouraged, equipped, and empowered you with meaningful insight from the Word of God to receive His promises and live a life without limits.